My name is Lauren Greenstein. This presentation is for CIST 608 Research Methods. It's a research proposal on investigating circumstances resulting in Vietnamese and Cambodian women being trafficked and sold to Chinese men for marriage. Human trafficking is an issue around the world, and it falls under two main categories of sex trafficking and forced labor. Today, we will look at a subset of human trafficking, sex trafficking, and that is forced marriage. In the context of human trafficking, forced marriage occurs when people are trafficked and sold for marriage to an individual. They are forced into this marriage. It's not of their own free will, or they have no say in not going through with the marriage. So this is an issue in China where women from Southeast Asian countries are sold to men in China. A lot of these women are trafficked. This is one of the consequences that it came from is that women were trafficked to China due to the one-child policy and how there's a disproportionate ratio of males to females in China, where there's more male population to the female population, and there's a lack of females to marry. So the two countries that we're going to be looking at are Cambodia and Vietnam. This study is going to look at and focus on the vulnerabilities and/or circumstances that led to the women being trafficked, sold, and forcibly married to men in China. This study is needed since past studies have been conducted on forced marriage and how it's tied into human trafficking, but they have not looked at it through the possible circumstances or vulnerabilities that led to these women being trafficked and forcibly sold and married to men. So by doing this study, we're going to be able to look at it from that angle and pursue new areas of study and just research. So women from countries in Southeast Asia are being trafficked to men and forcibly married to men in China. A lot of these countries are, like, some of the women are coming from Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, and North Korea. A lot of this is due to how the traffickers prey on the vulnerabilities of the women they target and their families to traffic and sell them to men in China. And through this study, we'll be able to study and compare how traffickers target women in different countries, and this will highlight how the victims are vulnerable in their respective countries. And we're also going to be able to see what are the similarities and differences between these possible vulnerabilities. And the main research questions of this proposal is going to be what vulnerabilities aided in the women being trafficked from research or past studies? Were there circumstances that aided in the trafficking? And did the woman's family or their family circumstances aid in the woman being trafficked? So this is basically, what is occurring in that specific woman's family who ends up being trafficked, does that contribute to them being trafficked? Past studies showed that the trafficking of women to China for forced marriage began in at least the 1980s. Many of the traffickers were Chinese nationals connected to the cross-border trade and also the traditional matchmaking business. This occurred with many men and families looking for brides, and also linked to the one-child policy. And this is through how the one-child policy and the gender imbalance attributed to forced marriage, and within China there was cultural links and cultural reasons for men to try and become married, to have children. This is where they're called my apologies for the pronunciation, guan or bear sticks, and how the men, if they're not married and have a child, are not viewed as an actual man. Like, they're almost viewed as a failure, and this was definitely occurring in a lot more rural areas that were lacking of a female population. So many of the women, like before, are being trafficked from countries including Vietnam, Cambodia, Myanmar, and North Korea. Those are countries that women are more vulnerable, and by trying to escape, they fall victim to trafficking. So through the studies, a few circumstances were reoccurring. This was recruitment and jobs, how they're being utilized by traffickers to entice women and trick them into being trafficked and forcibly married to men in China. This is through a trafficker is having, like, a recruiter is from the neighborhood, or like say a local woman is going in and they're trying to recruit people. They're trying to recruit other victims, other women, to be trafficked and sold to the men in China. This is by saying, oh, look at what happened to me, I prospered, or a family member prospered, trying to use those examples, and also that you're going to be able to get a job. So that is linked also to local economic and job opportunities within the local area, the local areas that allow the women to be trafficked. Additionally, is the topic of demi-brides, where the two ways are the woman knows they're going to be sold and married to a man in China, so they're okay with that. And it ends up they are married to a man of lesser financial means than they thought. So in that way, they are tricked. They thought they were going to be married to someone with more finances than they were, or that the woman is tricked and then married to a man and ends up being married and then having the man's kid. So they feel like they're trapped and they cannot leave their situation. So looking at the three hypotheses of the studies are, the first one is similar vulnerable circumstances of women in Vietnam and Cambodia led to the girls and women being trafficked to China and forcibly married. The second one is the targeted women or their families are in poor financial situations. And the third is how members of the community, either recruiter or family member, aided in the trafficking of the women. This study is going to be exploratory and also a qualitative open-ended interview. This is to see what led to the trafficking of the women, like from the start to the end point, from like what was occurring in their home life or in their neighborhoods that led to their trafficking. So this study is going to expose the possible issues, vulnerabilities, and circumstances that led to the women being trafficked. It will also allow researchers, government, and law enforcement to see how the women fall prey to the trafficking. This is going to allow government and researchers to see what is occurring, to try and create new preventive measures, just to try and protect future vulnerable populations. And the population for the survey is going to be 18 to 25-year-olds, and it's going to be the hopeful measure is going to be of 10 women from each country and a small snowballing sample set of where they're going to know of others who were in similar situations, or we're going to get it from the reports from law enforcement of that specific country. So we're going to hopefully get more people, and we're understanding that this is a more sensitive topic and people do not feel like talking about what occurred to them. So by using snowballing, we're trying to get more people involved in the survey and in the interview, and hopefully 30 people at most from each country. The independent variables for the study are going to be the formerly trafficked women and the two countries they came from, Cambodia and Vietnam, while the dependent variables are the lack of job opportunities, low familial financial means, and also the lack of prospects within the overall community that they're from. So the interview is going to be the title of the interview is of Southeast Asian Southeast Asian women who were trafficked and forcibly married to men in China. This is an open-ended interview with the participants, and it's going to go more in depth within the interview. This is going to prompt follow-up questions that are going to collect more information on the possibilities that led to the women being trafficked. We're going to be asking more questions as we go further in, and depending on their responses, this is to get more information on the possible vulnerabilities and what led to their trafficking. So the study is going to be exposing a lot of the different vulnerability, like as potential impacts. It's going to be exposing a lot of the different vulnerabilities that are going to come up within the population. We're going to be able to see a lot of the similarities between the overall populations and like the different countries, just like what vulnerabilities allowed the people to be trafficked. So we're going to be able to see that and just what occurs, like what traffickers utilize for to traffic the women for forced marriage. So this will also, for future discussions, allow for just for researchers and government to see, like, to gather and see like the different information that would contribute, and vulnerabilities that would contribute to the women being trafficked. So it's going to allow us for a lot of future research in other countries where they actually have similar circumstances of the women being trafficked and forcibly married. We're going to be able to do an analysis and see how it compares to Vietnam and China and Cambodia. So a lot of the main concerns and ethics is tied with the Belmont report and like the need to protect the people, their identities. So this is going to be through how we're going to have the interview location not within their specific neighborhood, but close to them, and we will have some form of a taxi service or someone to drive them and be able to transport them to us. And we're going to do it like anonymously and have them dropped off close to us, just not right on top. So like the researchers, the people involved, do not know who they are, how they're dropped off, and like the person dropping them off won't be able to realize that they're participating in our study. This is to ensure that no one within the neighborhood realizes the women are participating, just because a lot of times not everyone knows what happened to them. So we're going to be protecting them, making sure there's no way for anyone, for their identities and their involvement in the survey, the interview, to be realized. So this is going to also go into the informed consent and RB, like where we have to make sure all the women know what exactly is going to be occurring in the interview and how they can also be triggered. So those are possible limitations, just like their reactions to the interview, and also like with before, we're trying to get even like participation pool. A lot of the people will not want to be involved in this. Like they will not want to be talking about what occurred to them. So this study is going to be looking at the context of forced marriage and human trafficking differently through the vulnerabilities and circumstances that led to the women from Cambodia and Vietnam to be trafficked to China for marriage. And we're going to see just the different vulnerabilities that led to what occurred to them, and just like how human trafficking is such a concern, and how human trafficking and forced marriage is such a concern. We're going to be able to see just like future avenues of research too, like what was mentioned before, that we can see how other examples of forced marriage in other countries, we can study them and see possible similarities to what occurred in Vietnam and Cambodia to imply like a comparative analysis for for future researches. It'll also allow us, like especially with this study, it'll allow law enforcement and government just to see what is occurring to try and protect their vulnerable populations within the country. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to my presentation. Have a good day.